Welcome to the Modern Hippie Podcast, where we'll be exploring all of my favorite boundary-pushing people and topics surrounding consciousness, psychedelics, mental performance, functional medicine, living in alignment, and so much more. I'm your host, Barrett Perlman, a former pro wakeboarder turned body worker, energy healer, and well, a modern hippie. And I'm so glad you're here. Are you struggling to integrate your plant medicine or psychedelic experiences? Do you feel alone in your journey towards healing and self-discovery? It's time to discover the Sacred Integration Tribe. Our online membership community is dedicated to bringing people together to share their experiences and support one another on their healing journey. With access to a wide range of resources, including weekly expert guidance on live integration calls with me, Barrett Perlman, guest hosts, integration materials released monthly, and heart-centered peer support, you can finally find the tribe you've been searching for. Join Sacred Integration Tribe today at www.sacredintegrationtribe.com and discover the power of community on your path towards healing and personal growth. Again, that's sacredintegrationtribe.com. Welcome back to the Modern Hippie Podcast. I am joined today by my dear friend, Steph Schuldt, who is a 7-time world record-holding spearfisher, freediver and freediving instructor trainer, and captain, owner, and guide of the magical sailboat, Sail La Vie. Thank you so much for joining me today, Steph.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So some fun facts about Steph. She and I we went to high school together, and then we also roomed together our first year in college. And so we know each other pretty well.
Very well, I'd say. Yeah.
Yes. And what I love so much about you and your story is that you went down this like real straight arrow path of wanting to be a veterinarian and then kind of pivoting and going into business school and becoming a boss ass babe at business, getting your master's in business. And then you eventually got married, got divorced, and sold everything. I believe you sold everything now and bought this catamaran sailboat, 40-foot catamaran sailboat that you are living on and sailing on in the Bahamas and soon to be around the world.
Yep.
Wow. So there's so many things that I know and love about your story that I'm hoping you'll share with us today, which what made you go from being a boss at business to living on a sailboat? Can you connect those dots with that story for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is, if you're looking at a spectrum, right, it's polar opposites. I went from doing my hair and makeup every day, focus very much into the consumerism mindset of keeping up with the Joneses, having the nice car, the nice watch, the nice shoes, the nice clothes, having the gym membership, going to get your nails done, your hair done, making sure that you show up and you work more than everybody else, harder than everybody else. You're fighting for that next promotion, that next paycheck. You want that corner office. And I think what ended up happening was I was able to achieve that corner office at the age of 28. I was the vice president of a company, and society tells you that's when you've achieved success, is when you're the vice president and you have all of these things, these material things, and you're able to basically do whatever you want when you want to, have no monetary constraints at all, no financial burden at all. And I got there and it was like, okay, this is it. Like, this is what everybody talks about. This is how we define success as a society. I'm working 14 to 16 hours a day. I have all of these things, but my life requires me to make so much money in order to maintain the life that I've created for myself, because everything costs so much money. And I grew up on the water. I grew up on boats, fishing, snorkeling. And it was always a dream of mine to just buy a sailboat and sail into the sunset and never return and not have to worry about any of the stresses of land, never have to worry about sitting in traffic on I-95 ever again. And at the time, you mentioned, I had gotten married, divorced, and I changed jobs where I was working from home. I was working remotely. I had time to start scuba diving again. I got my freediving certification. I started traveling to freedive and spearfish. And the more I traveled to freedive and spearfish, the more I realized those were the moments I was happiest. And so at the time I had started doing a lot of journaling, and they say, write down, because I had been through a really hard time. You know my whole life history, but I had been through a really hard time, and I was trying to find happiness. I was at a really dark point in my life. I was not happy. I was like the skeleton of a person. I didn't know who I was. And so I started journaling what made me happy, what didn't make me happy, and how could I recreate the moments that were making me happy, who I was around, what I was doing, what I heard, what I smelled, what I was eating, and I wanted to create those moments. And the common denominator for me was the ocean. Just anytime I was around the ocean, I happened to be around amazing humans. I loved the smell of it. I love the sight of it. I love the sound of it. Everything about it made me happy. And nothing else made me feel that way. And so I said, I want this as my life. So let me figure out how to do that. And I did. I became a freedive instructor, quit my job, bought the boat, and sailed into the sunset with high hopes that it'd work out.
Well, and you did this also right before COVID.
Yeah.
And I remember.
Yeah. COVID was not a thing yet.
And if I recall correctly, your ambitions were to get on the sailboat and then also start bringing people on board. And like right when you were set up to do that, it was like, boom, COVID hit. And so how did you get through the beginning parts of COVID?
Yeah, that was definitely a challenge. Luckily, I don't read too much into things like that. Otherwise, I might have just turned around and sailed back and sold the boat. But I didn't. I used it as an opportunity. I was locked down in the remote Bahamas. The borders were closed. Nobody was able to come in. I couldn't do any business. I couldn't make any money. And I was sitting there with a depreciating asset, and everything was breaking on it. And I used it as an opportunity to learn my boat, to intimately learn my boat, to learn how to fix things, how to maintenance things, how to change them for my liking. I also put together a lot of business strategy, started focusing on social media as a way of marketing what I hopefully would eventually be able to offer. So when the borders opened back up, so many people were eager to travel. I had a waiting list of people who wanted to come on board. So I was very fortunate because thanks to working in business for 10 years, I had a nice little nest egg in my bank account saved up from the 10 years of working really hard climbing the corporate ladder. And I had to utilize most of that nest egg in order to stay afloat, literally, physically, for the first couple of years. And just like any business, year 1, 2, 3 in any business is going to be super challenging. If you do survive, you're not going to be profitable most of the time. So I came from a business background. I knew that was the case. So I didn't have unrealistic expectations of making millions of dollars by leaving corporate and buying a boat. But I would say my strength was just my patience. I believed so much in what I was doing, and that I was at the right place, and that it was going to be the right move for me, and that I had found what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And I was just patient, put the money in where it needed to be to make the boat safe and functioning. And then 6 months later, borders opened. I was able to do a couple trips, and then they closed again for a couple months, and then they reopened, and things took off. And it still wasn't easy, but it was enough to make ends meet.
I mean, what a powerful journey. And I'm so glad that you didn't go back, because I believe I was one of the first rounds of people that came to visit you on your boat once the borders open. And I snuck into the Bahamas in July of 2020 in like a 2-week window where they opened their borders.
That's right. I remember that.
And I had gone to Florida, and we were supposed to have, I think it was my grandpa's funeral. Or no, it was his birthday. Sorry, he hadn't died yet. Shame on me. It was his 90th birthday, but they decided against it because it was COVID. And so I had like 5 days, or you were like, can you come early by chance? And we didn't know the borders were going to close again. So I had magically just planned to come earlier. And like the day before my flight, they were like, we're closing the borders again. And so it was was a fun time to come and
Yeah,
join
you're like,
you.
what if I get stuck here? I'm like, well, then you get stuck here. I think there was some sort of like hurricane or something too when you were leaving. There was all kinds of things happening during that time.
Yeah, because I had been asking you for months in advance, like, hey, Steph, could we do a crossing from the Bahamas back to our hometown? Because we're from Southern Florida. And you were like, probably not. And then sure enough, there was like this hurricane coming the day I was supposed to fly out, and all these people were going to be stuck there. And you didn't want to be in the Bahamas for your first hurricane. And so we ended up crossing back over to South Florida. And that was so cool. So cool.
That was a very special trip. That was so much fun. You got to dive with sharks for the first time, overcome some fears.
Yeah, it was technically my second time, but but still, that was a massive. I tell that story a lot because it was still just one of the most powerful moments of my life, because you had me jump in the water and there were like 30 fucking sharks in there. And I had previously swum with like 3. And there's something really different about 3 and 30. And
yeah,
and I just
like 10 times.
Yeah, like exponentially, because you want to kind of keep your eye on them when you're in the water so that no one sneaks up behind you and takes an investigative bite from behind. And
yeah, absolutely.
And all of a sudden there were fucking 30. And I remember I was like panicking. I was crying. I was all these things.
Yeah.
And I remember I took a break in the middle of it and came on board and talked to you. And you had said to me that you apologized and you didn't understand beforehand that I was actually phobic of sharks.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between having a fear and a phobia?
I think it's the physiological response that you have. A fear is just being frightened of something, but a phobia is there's not really rationale to it at all. It's not you're fearful because of this. It's a physical response that your body goes through where it's full panic. Like you full panic. There's no thought process. It's I'm gonna die if this happens to me. And yeah, you seemed a little bit nervous at first, and then you were calm, cool, and collected. You got in the water. Everything was okay. You got out and you were just had a very strong emotional response. But I was extremely proud of you and impressed because after a little brief intermission, some breathing exercises, talking through it, we jumped back in together. We dove down together. We had some really great moments. And the second time you came up, it was a much different emotional response. So I'd call that a win.
It was a major win. It was amazing. And I'm so grateful to you for having that chat with me and then going back down with me. And you were like, I remember you even said to me too, like, I will pay you $1 million if you manage to get bit by a shark today. And I was like, how, Steph? All your money's in the boat.
Yeah. You're like, well, you don't have it, so I'm not going to try to prove you wrong. Too funny.
But you were right. You were such a shark master. And I think I was the last one to get out of the water that day. Like I ended up just loving it so much. And watching your friend Andre Musgrove, who is a phenomenal shark master, free diver, underwater videographer, tour guide of the Bahamas. He's always on Shark Week.
Yeah.
Watching him go down and dive with them, and he would like flip them over and pet their bellies and kiss them on the head. And they would all come running to him and being like, do me, do me. And I was like, what is going on with these sharks?
Yeah. Andre started as a shark diver. That was his first job. So he was in high school. He worked for Stewart's Cove here in the Bahamas. And he was the photographer for he was a shark feeder and a photographer when he was a child. So he's one with the ocean.
Literally.
Yeah.
And so we grew up in what's called the shark attack capital of the world. And that's that area from Cocoa Beach down to sort of Jupiter, like basically our hometown. And how did you don't think that's a rational fear?
I think because I never got into surfing. So I didn't really have the experiences that a lot of the surfers had or the fishermen. I wasn't really fishing either. If anything, I was snorkeling, not spearfishing, just snorkeling. And they didn't really want anything to do with me. So I never even knew that was a thing. I was never on my radar at all.
Well, lucky you. I was so scared. And then I had my my roommate out here in Los Angeles, she got bit by a shark down in the Dominican Republic while she was
Oh,
on a
wow.
shark tour. And so while we were living together, and I must have been about 28 years old or so when that happened. So yeah,
Wow.
I was just like, not doing sharks,
Yeah.
not interested.
Yeah. You have to be careful too who you go with, the situation you go with. There's a lot of controversy around it. People have different mindsets around it. At the end of the day, I'm first and foremost a spearfishing woman. And so I don't want sharks to associate humans with food as being fed, because then they're going to have the reaction that they're going to come up to us and eat. So when you're on my boat, we just we'll put the carcasses of fish into the bait crate and just bring the scent in, but not actually, we don't want them to actually associate us with food. That's when things get a little
Sure.
hairy. Yeah. And the number of people per guy, there's just a lot of different variables. Just do a lot of research, read reviews, ask about how many incidents they've had.
Definitely ask how many incidents. Hopefully the answer is it should be zero if you go with that person. It should be
zero. Yes, it should be zero.
Yeah. Because you taught me so much about shark behavior. And I mean, by the end of my trip with you, I was like so in love with sharks. And it just really revolutionized me to be like, we have to save them all. We have to save the ocean. We have to, oh my God, they're just these completely misunderstood creatures.
And now you're surfing in LA, which is terrifying.
So they say.
I wouldn't do that.
We have a lot of dolphins in Huntington Beach.
Oh, cool.
But just south of us is San Clemente and San Onofre, and that's where a lot of people get bit by tiger sharks and stuff, which I'm going to pass. But you swim with tiger sharks.
Yeah, but that's way less scary because I'm face to face with them. So they're getting a good solid look at like, this is not a meal. Whereas like you just have limbs dangling and some splashing at the surface. No thanks. Not my thing.
It did make me feel better about surfing though. Like if I could see it coming in the water, I would at least think to grab its nose or to touch it in some way, shape, or form so that it would immediately be like, wait, that's not what food does.
Yeah, absolutely. That you can apply those skills and that knowledge. That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm still working my way up to swimming with tiger sharks with you.
Oh, magical experience.
How would you describe that, swimming with them? And
it's so you sense them before you see them. They're really slow. Typically, they're really slow moving, and they'll stay just outside where we can see. They definitely, I would say, more kind of like stalk their prey in a way. Like it feels like they're definitely checking you out before they come in. And when they come in, they don't really mind that you're there. They'll just swim straight into you and kind of bump you out of the way. But it depends. It's also regional. Tiger sharks act differently depending on where you are. Like, for example, in the Bahamas, there's an area called Tiger Beach. They've been doing shark diving there for decades. And these sharks are somewhat domesticated. I use that term very loosely because they're still a wild animal. They can still have a reactive behavior and we can't determine exactly how they're going to act, but they are conditioned, I guess is a better word, to see the humans come in, expect to be fed a treat, and then go about their business. They're not acting agitated. They're not acting opportunistic. They're not trying to fight over food because they're just expected that they're going to be given it. So it's a much different experience than seeing a tiger shark in a different country or more like in the wild, a different island where they haven't done shark diving, where they're not as conditioned. They're going to have different behaviors. Most of the time, the tiger sharks are going to be much more skittish. They're going to be cautious, more afraid of humans. They're not going to come into you like those pictures you see of me like moving the shark. They don't typically do that in the wild. And they can be really curious and they can be really excited about food. So there can be opportunities for them, if you have a fish in your hand, for example, to come in with their pectoral fins down, moving quite fast, trying to take advantage of that free meal.
Which is a scary situation, I would imagine, to be in as a spearfisher. Like, I'm not really into spearfishing, but when I went out, I would go out with you every day while I was on your boat, and I would put myself on what we called shark duty because I was there to overcome my fear of sharks and be the person who, when someone catches a fish, like someone else would go and make sure to try and like fend off the sharks.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is a
You did a great job.
I think you saw me the first time one shark like kind of came in and like beelined it for us. And you had given me a talking to about sharks being like dogs. And you were like, the same way that you alpha a dog, you alpha a shark. And if a shark is being rude, you have to let it know. And the same way that you would puff up and claim your space as an alpha, you do that with a shark. And so one kind of made a beeline for us, and I turned and looked, and I immediately like swam backwards out of reaction. I stopped, and I was like, shit, I'm supposed to swim at it. Okay. Deep breath. And I like swam at it, and it was immediately like, whoa, 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 what the fuck is going on? Like, no. And then it turned around and swam off, and I was like, it worked.
I did it.
I couldn't believe it worked.
Yeah, making eye contact, swimming towards them, just establishing yourself as dominant. They're truly opportunistic, and when you take that opportunity away, they're like, whoa, okay, never mind. You win.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so you got into freediving. Were you so I know you were a scuba instructor before, and then you got into freediving. What sparked that shift for you?
Yeah. So I was a dive master for scuba. So I was working on a couple of boats as a dive master, like guiding, but I never was really passionate about becoming a scuba instructor because it was all about how to utilize equipment. So how do you put together your regulator onto your BCD and attach your tank? And it was all about equipment. And as a dive master, I realized that a lot of people put on a scuba tank and just turn off their brain. And there's quite a bit of liability as an instructor and a dive master when it comes to scuba diving. And it was just very cumbersome. The equipment was all very cumbersome and heavy, and I felt very limited in the water, and you're blowing these bubbles and the animals are all scared. And so I took a freediving course initially because my brother-in-law, Jared, we would go out lobstering together. I just freediving. At the time, I didn't know what freediving was. I just called it snorkeling. But I would just dive down, try to get a lobster, tickle it out, and net it. And he could stay down 3 times as long as me. And I was getting really frustrated because I'm somewhat competitive. And I was like, why can he stay down so long? And I'm like up and down, up and down. And so then I heard about a freediving course. So I took my first course, and I did okay. I wasn't like a prodigy or anything. I mean, I passed the course, and I was like, yay, I held my breath 2 minutes and dove 50 feet. Success. And then some of my scuba friends signed me up for an advanced freediving course, and that course blew my mind. I dove past 100 feet, did a 4.5 minute breath hold, and I realized that I could freedive just as deep as I could scuba dive, basically. And I didn't have to worry about a surface interval. I didn't have to worry about equipment. I didn't have a lot of the things I disliked about scuba diving were non-existent in freediving. It truly was a freeing feeling where you just grab a mask and fins, jump in, you can get closer to the animals, you can go from sunrise to sunset without any sort of intermission. And I was hooked. I was hooked.
Well, and so then you were married, and for if you don't mind me sharing this, but your marriage was not very happy and healthy.
Yep.
And he was not very kind to you, which was always devastating to me because I think that you are just the brightest light of a human being that I have ever met in my entire life. Your smile lights up a room. Your energy lights up all of the space that you're in. It's completely undeniable when people are around you. And you're welcome. And you had this husband who treated you horribly, at least mentally. And so when that marriage came to an end, I love what you've shared with me about how discovering your breath, and that changed everything for you. So could you share that story with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the foundation of our relationship between you and me was founded on our struggle with other relationships.
Yeah.
We were both equally pretty awful at finding kind people in our lives. So we just, trauma loves company, I guess. But Yeah, that was really challenging for me because uh, my ex-husband checked all of the boxes. He was what society tells you should end up with in a lot of regards. And yeah, he wasn't a very kind person. And I had a lot of trauma from that relationship. And going through the divorce was really traumatic. That entire process was not easy on me because my family's quite religious and divorce just isn't an option. So here I am going against a lot of my family's religious beliefs and people calling me a quitter and saying that when things got hard, I just took the easy way out. And you don't, it's good to share to some extent, but some things you don't need to share. And so I was always trying to put him, a lot of my relationship, I was putting him on a pedestal to make him seem like an amazing person, because that's what narcissists have you do. And I also, through our divorce, didn't want to make him look bad. I didn't want people to have a bad image of who he was. And I thought I took a lot of responsibility for it, saying, oh, maybe he's not a bad person. Maybe he just really dislikes me. Maybe it's me that's causing the problems. So I thought that it was just his response to me as a person. And that was really challenging. So I would have a lot of moments where I would go into a panic, a really strong physiological response. And freediving did help me breathe through those moments where you're focused on your breath. You can lower your heart rate. You can kind of get yourself through those anxiety attacks and pull yourself into the present and be able to handle those situations in a much more positive way. So I credit freediving to, it was like turning on a light switch for me, and just showed me kind of a clear direction of what I could have with my life, found who I was again, allowed me to create the best version of myself in a really positive way.
I love that for you. And I became a breathwork facilitator in this past year. And one of my favorite things is helping people learn the breath. And I'm consistently shocked how many people I teach who haven't been breathing into their bellies their entire life, taking that deep breath. And,
not since you were a baby.
Yeah, right. It's pretty crazy. Like if your chest rises a lot and your shoulders rise when you're taking in breaths, you should rethink some things. Get in touch with me. We'll talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Game changing.
Yeah. But I love the freediving breath, like the breathe up. What is the pattern on that breath and why is it so effective for freediving?
Yeah. So when we freedive, the focus is to lower your heart rate as much as possible. And what that allows you to do is hold your breath a lot longer and stay under the water for an amount of time that most people don't think is possible. And we can do that. A lot of it is just breath work. It's just focusing on your breath. So what we teach in freediving is a short inhale of about 2 seconds, like you're sucking in through a straw. Pause for 2 seconds to stabilize your heart rate. And then a nice, slow, controlled exhale, breathing through your teeth, like you're making a noise like a snake, just to minimize the amount of muscles that you're using. And it's a nice passive exhale for anywhere between 8 and 10 seconds, whatever comfortable. So, and then pause for 2 more seconds, and then inhale for 2 seconds. So it's just a pause, exhale. Pause, inhale. And you just go through that, and it kicks in something called our mammalian dive reflex, which is a reflex that you're born with as a mammal. And it automatically starts lowering your heart rate and preparing you mentally and physically to have a successful dive.
That's so cool. And
I'm already relaxed.
I know, I'm relaxed just watching you. And is part of that reflex also from getting like your face in water?
Yeah, that's another thing that kicks it in. So we call them triggers, like a way to trigger your mammalian dive reflex. And so you have a lot of receptors on your face that tell your body if you're in air or water. And so by exposing those receptors to water, by putting your face in the water, you're actually telling your body, okay, you're in water. You can lower your heart rate. You can start to shift your blood to your vital organs. And the mammalian dive reflex go ahead and Google it. It's quite fascinating what our body's capable of. And what I love about teaching freediving is that we were born with this reflex that your body has that the majority of the population has never utilized. And it's something you can kick in minutes. And now you have just unlocked potential and things that you didn't think were possible. Like holding your breath for 4 minutes or diving down to 100 feet.
That was one of my favorite things about learning to free dive with you was all of the ways in which our body is prepared to not let us die in water.
Yeah.
I thought for sure, like once you're out of air, you're inhaling that ocean and you're done for. And that's not quite how it works at all. Like what is your body's response to not having enough oxygen?
Yeah, it's great too. I've had a lot of surfers reach out and do freediving courses with me because of what do you call them? Where you're like held down in the wave, hold
Big
downs or
wave
something.
surfing? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like where you're like hold down for multiple waves, like you've been tumbled and you're held down underwater and multiple waves go by and you're just under there, like being tossed. And I've had a number of surfers reach out for courses because they want to learn how to relax their body and basically do a static holding their breath as they're being tossed and turned around so that they can survive those takedowns.
Yeah, it's incredibly helpful and something that I was grateful to draw on for my surfing because, here in Huntington Beach, I'm not really surfing anything that's like crazy
Massive.
big, like big waves. Yeah, we're like maybe 8 feet is what I'll go out in here up to, but that's still pretty big. But you can get tumbled and you're oftentimes falling and not prepared for it. So you don't get to do a breathe up before you crash, but
right.
But having the knowledge in my head that on my best day, in my best moments, I can hold my breath for 3 minutes to 3.5 minutes. I actually did on land once. Is comforting enough to know that I'm only getting tumbled for like 20 to 30 seconds. And I got
this too shall pass. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like I'll just be ragdolling and just going, okay, relax though. Just relax and wait. And it's so helpful.
Yeah, that has to be terrifying.
Yeah. What are some of the symptoms the body will start to exhibit if it's running out of oxygen?
Yeah, so one of the main things that we teach in freediving is the signs and symptoms of hypoxia, because everybody who hasn't done research into freediving or taking some sort of freediving class associates the urge to breathe, those like diaphragmatic contractions, like that with, okay, I'm running out of oxygen. And what's crazy about freediving is that urge to breathe is really just your body's intolerance to carbon dioxide. So it's a buildup of CO2 in your system, and it has nothing to do with you actually needing to breathe. It's not actually loss of oxygen at all. So the first signs or the first symptoms, what you're going to feel yourself is going to be tingling in your fingers and toes. What you're going to see on somebody, the signs is you're going to see their fingernails and their lips are going to start to turn purple. And that's really your first sign that you're hypoxic. And obviously if you're getting tossed and turned in the waves, when you're surfing, it's going to be a lot shorter of a time. But when you're in a swimming pool, that typically doesn't happen until about 3 or 4 minutes when you first start getting the first signs of hypoxia, being low on oxygen. So our bodies can go way, 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 way further. Our brains are really the biggest limiting factor when it comes to breath hold and freediving.
Yeah, no kidding.
As in everything.
Which is what makes freediving such a powerful life tool. Like if you can overcome your desire to breathe and mind over body, tell yourself that you have all the oxygen you need and that your body just needs to do what it's told right now. Gosh, what an incredible tool for anxiety, for panic, for stressful situations. And another thing too about freediving is like even if you run out of oxygen, and please correct me where I'm wrong or tell me more, but like your body won't immediately breathe. What does your body do?
That's correct. Yeah, you can have two things happen to you: loss of motor control and then blackout. And loss of motor control is your body is really losing control. So you're stuttered breathing, kind of shaking, convulsing. And what happens prior to this is your spleen actually contracts and your spleen has oxygen rich red blood cells. So it's your body like saying, hey, you got this. And it gives you kind of a shot of oxygen saying you can last a little longer. So typically before somebody has a hypoxic event, they're going to feel fantastic. They're going to have a euphoric feeling. Like their whole body feels tingly. They feel like a mermaid. They're like, I can stay down here forever. And then you have your loss of motor control or your shallow water blackout. And like you said, it's not that you just run out of oxygen and just suck in water. What happens is your body goes into conservation mode. And it's like screensaver mode. Like the computer is still on and active. It's just not there. And so you go into screensaver mode. You have something called a laryngospasm where your larynx closes. So you're not actually inhaling any water and you lose consciousness. So you're just kind of sitting there floating. And this can last, your blackout can last anywhere from a couple minutes all the way up to, I think the longest recorded was 42 minutes. They did some sort of documentary about a young boy who fell through the ice, lost consciousness, and was without oxygen for, I don't know the exact number of minutes, but it was long. And then he came to and had a full recovery. And so if the biggest concerning factor is when your body does release that blackout, that your laryngospasm, your larynx opens back up and you do take what we call terminal gasp. So it's your body's last ditch effort to try to put oxygen into your body. And so when it takes terminal gasp, if that gasp is of air, then you live. And if that gasp is of water, then you drowned. And that's the difference. So that's why when you see in movies drowning victims and they do CPR and then the person comes to and they're like, and they like cough up water. That's because the water was just in their mouth because their larynx closed off. So they're not actually inhaling any water, which is your body's defense to protect itself. If you had inhaled the water, then you would be vomiting, you'd be coughing up bubbly, foamy stuff because it would have been in your lungs. And that's way more dangerous than water just in your mouth. So your body goes through a lot of things first to prevent you from blacking out. But then if you do black out, to go into conservation mode to make sure you survive it. So key to everything is have a good buddy, make sure they have your back and they know how to save you.
Wonderful safety tips. And I love that. And that gives me so much more confidence being out there in the water to just relax and in those snorkeling situations, and hopefully can inspire some others to do the same. I actually saw that movie that was based on the documentary of that boy who fell through the ice.
Yeah.
It was really powerful and wild and crazy stories. Yeah. And so you also have been setting world records spearfishing, which I'm so proud of you for.
Thank you. Never did I think that was going to happen. If anything, you're the world record holder of the two of us. You're way more badass than I ever will be. So
not at all true, because look at you now.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked on it.
What is your favorite world record that you've set?
So the world records I have are all freediving, spearfishing, fish on pole spear. So I'm diving down without scuba gear. I'm using a pole spear, which means it doesn't have any sort of trigger mechanism. It's just a rubber band that you pull up the spear, let go, and shoot the fish. And I just set a record. I wasn't necessarily going for this fish as a record. This was a bucket list that I wanted to do so badly, which is to shoot a wahoo on a pole spear. Wahoo are very fast, very challenging to hunt, very challenging to get close enough. And then when you shoot them, they have really soft skin. They run like heck. They rip themselves out of shots really easily. And even, I guess, in addition, or more importantly, they are so delicious. They're one of my favorite fish to eat, and they're super sustainable. So they're abundant in every ocean they exist. There's no sort of like protection needed on them because they're just a win-win-win fish all the way around. And I wanted to shoot a wahoo on a pole spear because it's really been a goal of mine for like 5 years, because I didn't know if it was possible. It's really challenging to do. And it was just something that I was like, well, if I can shoot a wahoo on a pole spear, I can kind of do anything on a pole spear. And I traveled over to Fiji to visit Cole, my boyfriend. And we went spearfishing there, and I did shoot a wahoo on a pole spear. It was 26.8 pounds. And I set the record for women's wahoo on pole spear, because there's a women's category and a men's, just like every sport. But prior to that, I had actually shot a really large one in the Bahamas, and I got a good shot on it in the tail, and the slip tip, which is part of the pole spear at the end, got wrapped around its tail, and it ripped itself out of the shot. So it got away.
Ugh.
And so even though I shot this one in Panama, I knew that I could shoot a bigger one because I had, and I knew I could land a bigger one. And so when we came back to the Bahamas, I invited Cole to come on board with me, and we went to a really remote island in the Bahamas where one of our Bahamian friends invited us, and I ended up landing an 84.6 pound wahoo on pole spear, which
Holy
was
shit.
Yeah, it was the biggest wahoo ever landed on pole spear ever in history, ever recorded. So, and the biggest female record on pole spear. So, that was just a win-win-win fish all the way around.
That is so fucking cool. You think I'm a bigger, you're crazy, girl. You're such a fucking badass.
No, well, you're pro wakeboarder, snowboarder, all the things. Like, yeah.
There's so much to being a badass. And another thing that I think makes you such a badass is how well you know your boat. Like, I'm always following your stories on Instagram, and you do such an amazing job of taking everyone on this journey with you. And you do so much of the work on the boat yourself. Like, I know you have those massive times where you take it in, and I see your checklist and your spreadsheet of what needs to be done, and I'm crying for you.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
Yeah, but like what you've learned to do yourself is just, I'm so impressed. I'm so proud of you. How did you learn to work on your boat?
That was one thing. I did many things very, very wrong, but that was one thing that I believe I did really right when I bought my boat. Is I didn't know anything about boats. I didn't know how to do anything on engines or electronics or plumbing. I didn't know the difference between a flathead and a Phillips screwdriver, or like when to use a screwdriver, when to use a hammer. Like I was really not like, it was like, it was like, I don't know, general labor for dummies times like 100. But what I did right is kind of a blessing and a curse. I bought my boat. I knew it needed a little bit of work. It ended up needing much more work than I thought. And I had to basically replace all of the guts. And I tried not to replace them. I tried to repair them first, and then ended up having to replace them anyway. But I would hire people to teach me how to do things, not just to do them. So I did an entire engine rebuild on both of my engines with my friend Derek. Derek and Laura, they're fantastic humans, and
I love them as well.
They're just awesome human beings. And he was they were both so patient with me, and would let me video everything, would let me take notes and everything. I'd call him and I'd say, hey, can you remind me about this? And they really saved the day for me, because ultimately my goal is to go sail across the Pacific and go get lost over there. And I realized early on that I was solo sailing at the time. I need to be dependent only on myself. I can't be relying. It's not like you have a house and your AC breaks and you can just call the AC repair guy. It doesn't work that way. There are no diesel mechanics in the middle of the Pacific. So I just hired people to teach me how to do things, and it's total immersion out here and survival mode. So you learn by necessity, because there's not another option.
Oh God, I can only imagine. And I saw one time you actually had a fire on your boat.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, there were 2 incidents where it was more smoke than flame. But one of them, it was a bad connection with the water maker pump, and it just started smoking. And then the other one was a bad connection with the shore power, which is actually really terrifying, because shore power, you have so many volts of electricity going through there. And with either of them, an electrical fire is really terrifying, and fires can take down boats within minutes. So we avoided bad situation. Luckily, with the shore power, we had pulled into a marina, and the boat next to us, we were just chit chatting. He's like, yeah, I just had to put, I think like $170,000 into my boat for repair after my power cord caught fire. And he said, make sure you're checking your power cord regularly. Like, this was a major issue for me. Well, it wasn't 3 or 4 days later. We unplugged the shore power, and I handed Cole the outlet. And I was like, that feels kind of warm. And he looked at it and he noticed, and he said, holy cow, we were moments away from a boat fire. And this was a couple days later. So it's all about being proactive and not reactive, because fires are no joke. I mean, that destroys everything.
Absolutely. And I mean, especially if that you're out in the ocean, like, what do you do? And I know you have your dinghy, but also
dinghy and a life raft. Not a great plan B.
No. But what a beautiful synchronicity too of kind of the universe looking out for you, where that got on your radar. So as you're looking at it, you're like, wait, that guy just said that story. And
yeah. And it wasn't, I think it was the next month, we were at a different marina next to our friend on his boat. And he had pulled in next to us when we had that situation on our boat. Fast forward a month, we're next to him in a different marina, and he had the same situation happen. So any boat owners out there, check your shore power, like at least, every time you plug it in, like just take a quick look at the connections. Because ours was actually the mount in the boat. So I had to go inside one of the compartments to check the backside of it. And it's just bad connections at the end of the day. You're on a boat, everything's kind of shaking and moving and waves, and the connections aren't going to be strong all the time. So big learning lesson.
Yeah. And what a wild thing on a boat. Like, everything's moving, everything's coming undone all the time, and everything's constantly rusting and eroding.
Yeah. So you take your house and your car, and then you just put them on salt water. That's what I live with. Yeah. Genius. And that's what I live with. So this life definitely isn't for everybody. You have to go into it with the mindset of everything's breaking all the time. And you just have to learn how to MacGyver and have a really positive attitude about it, and just say, okay, let's add it to the list. Is that a today thing, or a tomorrow thing, or like a next week thing? But, you stay busy, and it's really fulfilling. I had done a lot of work in business for a long time, and nothing is fulfilling as servicing my generator, getting your hands dirty and getting down there and working for something that provides back to you, and that allows you to continue living your dream. I mean, you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your dream, you're investing in making a difference, and your time isn't wasted on micromanaging and mundane tasks.
Truth. Oh, yeah. What a fulfilling. And then you get to catch all your food, or much of your food, and live on the ocean and swim with the dolphins and swim with the sharks. And what is one of the most magical moments that you recall recently?
Well, recently I had a really interesting experience with a bull shark. We had a pregnant bull shark swimming around us, and we were spearfishing, and we had gotten a couple of fish, and she was being very respectful of our space, really wasn't causing too many issues, wasn't coming in hot or anything. And so I decided to jump in the water. I wanted to do some GoPro video. I wanted to swim with her. And so I jumped in the water just by myself. And I was swimming around. And I kind of created some vibration at the surface, just like a little, to get her attention, because she was swimming away. And the moment that she heard just that little vibration, she turned 180 degrees and was on the bottom and came straight up at me. And reviewing the footage, I was looking at it because all I had my boyfriend's mask with his GoPro on it. So I don't have my pole spear. I don't have like a stick with a GoPro. I just have like his mask that I'm holding like this, like filming. And she comes straight up at me, not like pissed off or trying to eat or anything. Her fins were nice and out, but she was swimming like really curious, like coming up, and she just came straight into me. And I have his mask with the GoPro, and I'm trying not to touch her because bull sharks can be a little feisty, and she's pregnant, and I didn't know how she would respond to my touch. And I also didn't want her to scratch his mask or the GoPro because that was all I had. So I'm like trying to like move out of her way without touching her or having her like scratch anything. And she came into me, then she went into my fins. And the moment that my fin hit her, she's like, oh, this is not something yummy. And she swam away really hard, like dropped her fins, got really scared and like swam away. And then she wouldn't come back in and interact with me. And because I had scared her. And that was a cool experience because it was unexpected. I just didn't expect her to have such a strong response, curiosity response, where she was coming in and then to be so much up in my business, even though I'm making eye contact and looking at her and doing all the things. So it was really cool because it showed me, even though I've studied their behaviors for many years, every shark, every situation, every condition is going to be different. And a lot of times it's not predictable. So a bit humbling as well.
Yeah, what a beautiful moment. Thank you for sharing that story, because I love that. And I love that about the ocean. Like, they're all wild creatures and they're all different, and there's no way to meet every single one of them, and just the beauty of them.
Yeah, just like humans. People ask me all the time, like, if you're saying sharks aren't man eaters, then why do people get killed by sharks? And I'm like, yeah, well, humans aren't typically, you're not going to find humans just killing humans, but it happens. Like, catch somebody that's a little bit off or catch somebody on a bad day, like they're going to be a little crankier, a little more aggressive than normal. And it's the same thing with wild animals.
Truth. And so what do you do now? Like, I know you charter your boat, you bring people in for tours, but what's your official, like, how people can come and live this magical existence with you?
Yeah. So what we've started to focus on now is more of blogging and documenting. Cole's really good at photography and videography. So we've been doing a lot more videoing. I started my YouTube channel, and the purpose of me starting the YouTube channel is really kind of like a photo album when we're growing up. I want to have these memories to look back on, but I also want to use it as a platform to share the experiences with my friends and family and people who wouldn't have the opportunity to experience something like this, so they can see life through my eyes. And just share that part. We're about to start a really fun adventure, sailing from the Bahamas to Panama, spending about a year in Central America, and then going across the Pacific. So yeah, I mean, I still do charters, still have people on the boat. We're doing, one or two every couple of months, but really focusing more on the YouTube game and doing more content creation.
Oh, that's phenomenal. And I love to hear that for you, because I can only imagine how taxing, albeit enjoyable, that must have been to always have people in your home, to always be cooking for them, to always be like...
The way I described it, I was just talking to somebody. The way I just described it, I said it's so fulfilling. It's such an awesome experience. But imagine somebody comes over to your house and they say, "Teach me everything you're passionate about all day long." And then you do, and then they're like, "Okay, now I want dinner." And then you cook them dinner and you do the dishes, and then you're like, "Okay," and then you put them to bed, and then they knock on your door and say, "Hey, what about some toilet paper?" And then you give them toilet paper, and then you go to bed, and then you wake up at sunrise, and like they're like, "Hey, how about some coffee now?" And then you're making them coffee, and they're like, "Okay, I'm ready for a great day of you sharing your passion with me." And it's like, it's incredible. It really is incredible. It's also, if you do that too much, you're just pouring without having time to refill. And that's really challenging from a health perspective, a mental perspective, and also physically on the boat, just the use and abuse that goes through with it. So I don't want to stop doing charters. I definitely want to do them. I just want to be more intentional with who I'm bringing on board, the time periods that I'm bringing them on board, and have other streams of revenue as a way to supplement.
Beautiful. And that's the dream right there, of sailing off into the sunset.
Yeah, exactly.
And so how did you meet your boyfriend?
Yeah. Oh, this is a fun story. So Cole and I met like almost 5 years ago now. And one of our mutual friends, he had played baseball with him, and I had actually lived with him in college, and he introduced us via social media. He's like, "Hey, I know, he told Cole, I know this girl, she's just getting into freediving spearfishing. I think you guys would completely hit it off. And so Cole invited me down to Key West to go spearfishing for Wahoo, funny enough. And I went out spearfishing for Wahoo with him. I didn't land one, which he likes to remind me about, but
Okay,
I have
but now you got
improved.
the world record.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I didn't land one. We dated for a couple of weeks, and he was down in Key West. I was up in Palm City at the time, and the timing just wasn't right for me. It was pretty soon after my divorce, and I wasn't eager to rush into any relationship. And I also had a lot of healing to do, and I wanted to take the time to be selfish. And so I shared my dream. I was like, I want to buy a sailboat and sail around the world. He's like, I want to buy a sailboat and sail around the world. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So we stopped talking. We stayed friendly. We stayed in touch, and I ended up buying my boat. And in the meantime, he jumped on one of his friend's sailboats in Tahiti and sailed from Tahiti to Fiji, and ended up living on a sailboat for almost 2 years over in Fiji. So here we are. He is a captain, a freediving instructor, a spearfishing guide, a professional fisherman, photographer, videographer, and we're living these parallel lives on opposite sides of the world. And we had mutual friends so I linked up with them in the Bahamas, and we were buddy boating, which means our boats were like next to each other for about 7 months in the Bahamas, and we were running trips. And I found out that they actually knew Cole from running spearfishing trips in Tonga 8 years prior. So before I had ever met Cole, before I'd ever met them, they had already met Cole. So really small world. And we sailed back to Fort Lauderdale together. At the time, Cole was just returning back from Fiji and happened to be driving from Key West up to Jacksonville, Florida for his brother's birthday party. And we were in Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale is a halfway point, and he wanted to surprise our friends, Hilton and Amy. That was his excuse. And so I was like, yeah, like, come surprise them. I'm staying with them. You can come stay the night. We're at my friend's condo. It's going to be fun. And we rekindled that night. We just talked about all the things that had happened since the last time we saw each other. And I invited him to come on the boat. So he came on the boat, bought a one-way ticket. We celebrated his birthday at Tiger Beach. So he got to have an interaction with a tiger shark for his first time. And we just hit it off. And everything just flowed very naturally and very quickly, but very naturally.
I fucking love that for you. Because when I saw you last in person in the summer of 2020, I remember you being like, I don't know how I'm really ever supposed to meet someone, because they're going to have to want this life. They're going to have to want to live on my sailboat because I own it and do all of this all the time. And
it gets more challenging for us, right? Like, we're in our 30s, we're single women, we have our careers, we have everything kind of set. And so just in general, the pool of available candidates is relatively small compared to when you're in your 20s. But then add to it that I live on a sailboat in the Bahamas. And I had dated a couple guys who were really, really attracted to the idea of the package that I came with. But what I found is when they came on board to do a trip, or when they came on to test it, it was never their passion. So they were losing their identity just to latch on to hang on to my coattails and just go for the ride. And that's not attractive. That's not what I want for my partner. I don't want somebody who just becomes completely codependent on me. I need somebody who not only was willing to move on board and share this experience, but I needed somebody where it was their dream as well, independent of mine. And I found it. Surprisingly, I didn't know it existed, but if I can do it, there's hope for everybody.
So true. I actually just met my partner, and about a month ago, maybe, and we met on Instagram.
Yeah.
And kind of similar thing where I've started to just be like, God, I'm so far along on this journey and this path that I'm walking. I'm tired of trying to pull whoever I'm dating up by their hair to bring them up with me and reach me at my level. And I guess I just give up. I give up on dating, and getting some great. This past year really opened my eyes to what was possible. Like I had this incredible partner for a little bit named Nick, who was so healing for me, and we're still good friends to this day. But
I love
yeah,
it.
this guy really rose, and I have so much respect. I had been following him for like a year before we even met and connected, and
I love that for you.
yeah, thanks. So it's also going at the speed of light, quantum dating, which I'm here for. And I think it's really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Well, I'm so happy you're happy. And I'm stoked that you're going to Panama. And I may have to figure out how to come join you somewhere in Central America, because I love Central America. South America.
Absolutely. I would love for you to come out and our forces combine and do something really, offer a really cool program for anybody who's interested. I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yes, we will riff more and share it with you guys when we're ready. And how can my listeners best keep up with you?
Best way to follow along would be Instagram and YouTube, which is just Freediver Steph. So pretty simple.
Awesome. I will have those all linked up in the show notes. And thank you again so much for joining me today. And I just love continuing watching your journey, and encourage everyone else to do the same. It's not only beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, but a delight to watch what you go through.
Thanks, ma'am. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and review this podcast wherever you're listening. I'm so grateful to have you on this journey with me. Until next time.